Welcome back to the dungeon series. We're starting part 1 with the first dungeon the devs ever created and the first one players get to in terms of leveling up, the Ascalon Catacombs. If you don't know what this is, be sure to click the link in the description to get to part 0, my explanation of this series, and we'll be waiting for you when you get back. Starting off, we're actually beginning in Lion's Arch to check out these two vendors here, the dungeon historians. These are the characters in today's Guild Wars 2, 2019, you speak to actually get your loot. They used to be located all around the world outside the dungeons themselves. Then they were moved to another location within Lion's Arch where they were in a big row near a character Dougal Keane who featured in one of the novels. Ghosts of Ascalon, funnily enough, dealing with the same subject material this dungeon's going to be. Maybe that's not a coincidence. And finally, they're here, in almost a random place, just standing around at Fort Mariner. Players do still have some incentive to do dungeons. Various legendary weapons will require gifts from the dungeons. Basically, you play the content itself, which gives you currencies, which you then spend for exclusive rewards here. The currency we want for Ascalon Catacombs rewards are called Tears of Ascalon, and you get those from doing the dungeon itself. So there is this bit of flavor text here, just talking a bit about it and pointing players to it. First, they say, what would you like to know about our relic collections? We can say, what can you tell me about the dungeons? These are dangerous and challenging sites described on your map as dungeons. They're best explored with a party of trusted allies. Tell me about the Ascalon Catacombs. Well, they are located in the plains of Ashford. That cursed place is home to the angry spirits of Ascalonians who were transformed by the faux fire. With that information, we can move on to it. We'll return back here at the end of the episode when we have some loot to see what we can buy. So dungeons are group content. For this series, you will see I'm playing with you guys, the viewers, as we travel through. We're doing it in a way that doesn't skip ahead and use expansion-related skills and specializations, so you really get as close to that vanilla experience as possible, though obviously skill balance and stuff would have changed over the years, and that's something we'll be identifying as we go further forward. For my builds, it's exactly the same as you saw in the LP. I've just changed my utility skills a little bit. I'm mostly an aggressive warrior for today's video with not even that good gear. It's not all level 80 gear. It's not all exotic gear. It's certainly not higher than exotic gear, and we will see how we do. Outside the dungeon, we can speak to Crag Ghoststalker, whose dialogue has changed now that we've beat story mode, who says, "Hold, the catacombs are a restricted zone. King Adalburn has been defeated, but the Dermond Priory is working down there and has found something nasty." Something nasty? Apparently the ghosts were keeping darker things in check. Now the haunted depths are overrun with gravelings. Well, why is the Priory here? Well, the Priory has an interest in old lore and ruins. They sent a team of Char, Asura, and even humans here. Humans in Ascalon. So we really get the fallout of the main story when we do these. What needs to be done? We'll gather a group of 5 adventurers and head into the catacombs. You'll find the Priory within. You'll notice the game doesn't say these have to be guildies and people you really know very closely. It does kind of encourage pugging, I guess, to an extent. It just says fighting 5 people. But as we know from the dev's description, this is meant to be not necessarily pug-friendly, but really coordinated. The flavor text on the outside of the dungeon has changed too now, to say this, that a Dermond Priory team is researching the Ascalonian catacombs and has found darker things lurking within its depths. I really like this idea that the story sets up the ghosts as being so deadly and dangerous, and now we find something even worse. Still undead, but worse. This new enemy, the Gravelings, that you don't really find elsewhere in the game at all. So you really get like that sense that going into an explorable dungeon gives you things you wouldn't find elsewhere, even just beyond the rewards. So, with your team ready in this antechamber, we just come over to this explorer and get a new cutscene.
Finally, a friendly face. We thought pushing back the ghosts would make us safe. Instead, we're in more danger than before. Our camp is barely holding out against the Graveling attacks. The scholars say the only hope is to kill one of their patriarchs. But our scholars can't agree on which patriarch to target. Maybe you can break the deadlock. Please, head down there and find our camp. We need your help.
So these new creatures, the Gravelings, are being spawned from patriarchs, and much as the early interviews described about dungeons, This one is oriented to give us the same final boss each time, just with different mechanics and different circumstances. Kill the Patriarch, get rid of the Gravelings. The start was described in that interview as being really long as well, getting to the Priory camp. You have to fight all the way there. Turns out in-game, it's just this minor sequence with these small traps in front of us we need to not step onto. I'll talk more about those later. They feature in the Catacombs a lot. And a single creature here called a Breeder. Breeders knock you down and summon lots of mini Gravelings, but this guy at the start dies super fast.
See? This is why we need a cohesive plan. People just wander in here and get attacked.
No one's arguing about the need for a plan. Your plan is just stupid and won't work.
Don't mind them. Come with me. We have a Priory base of operations set up nearby.
And so off we go to the base. You'll notice we're going through a different wooden door than in story mode, which had us go through the left. So this is now new stuff we hadn't seen before, despite being in the same location. The 3 NPCs we have near us also are actually the 3 different sort of main characters for the 3 paths we can choose. They each have a plan, and we'll get to decide for each of the 3 main paths which one to follow. This video is going to be structured such that we see them all in order, but that's going to have us starting off, I believe, with the human, Hodgins. Human very much out of his depth here in the Charlands. So this is the camp. It's hardly an adventure to get here, right? Not sure if that was going to be longer at some point.
Your ignorance will get us killed, Zark. The Ghost Eater represents a threat we've never seen before.
Your Ghost Eater only eats spirits. Colossus Rumblus will collapse the catacombs. That's the real risk.
You're both wrong. The Howling King is gathering an army that could easily overrun us.
We've been arguing like this since the Graveling Patriarchs appeared. You'd think 3 scholars could agree on something.
We should settle it now. Now talk with us, decide which beast is the biggest danger, then speak to Shrill Sunderbach about a course of action.
So, 3 threats, 3 creepy-sounding Graveling Patriarchs with different flavors. They couldn't really be much more basic than this.
Knowledge is the greatest treasure.
We can spend a minute, though, speaking to them. Hodgins says, my apologies, the rise of the Graveling Patriarchs has this camp on edge. And we can ask him, well, hold on, where did the Gravelings come from? One of these NPCs will actually give us quite detailed mechanic information. We'll get that later, though. Hodgins says, Adalbern's presence kept them underground. When he was defeated, they just sprang up everywhere. We've been arguing which is the most dangerous. We say, which one are you concerned about? He said, I spotted him, well, heard him a few weeks ago. I call him the Howling King, and I've seen him summon a dozen Gravelings with a shout that would chill Grenth. So, what's your plan to stop the Howling King? In my research, I learned the flaming scepter mages of old Ascalon are buried here with their weapons. A part of their scepters would certainly kill the Howling King. We say, where are they? Well, the old journals don't pinpoint exact burial sites, but I've narrowed it down to the most likely. So, the flaming scepter mages we actually know from the original game and early mission. Really fun to see them referenced in this dungeon. We say, the boss doesn't sound so bad. He says, without the ghost to keep them in check, these Gravelings will eventually come up here and dine on us. We don't have the defenses to stop a Graveling army. And, well, I guess for this version of the dungeon, we think he's the most convincing. We'll come to this Char, who's just kind of a generic NPC we use to input our votes. She says, where are the orders? So you see this is an interesting dialogue box with a red bar going down. The personal story didn't really do this. It's a timer to let everyone in the party pick the dialogue choice. You'll see that a little 5 appears representing our vote. That doesn't really get utilized much of elsewhere, but I really like how Guild Wars was flirting, at least a little bit, with the idea of cooperative RPG dialogue branches. Imagine if the personal story had had cooperative play more in mind and actually utilized this kind of voting system. We see it a little bit in the open world. If you watch the LP series, you remember like the whiskey bar in some of those early developed maps from the devs also used that, but mostly it's a thing in dungeons and to make sure everyone consents to the decision we're making.
You made the right choice. Ascalonians had a penchant for using flaming scepters against their enemies. I've learned of several scepters hidden away in these catacombs. Let's go. I'll guide you to them.
So take note there of how Hodgins simply says several scepters and doesn't give an actual number.
What's on your mind?
That'll be something interesting to look at later. Detha, since we didn't choose her, has kind of angry dialogue for us, saying we chose a fool's path. And Sark says, why would you choose one of them over a chance at science and heroism is quite perplexing, but I've never understood the feeble-minded. So those two aren't very happy, but they'll get their chance a little bit later. None of the other NPCs have dialogue, so let's move on.
Do you hear that? Sounds like... Damn it! Another Graveling mound. Close it before they overrun the camp. We'll guard the entrance.
So, in the pre-release press, the devs talked about dynamic events randomly appearing in dungeons. Well, as far as the coding is concerned, this is us experiencing our first one. It's not random, it will always appear, so kind of defeats the point of what they were going for. But in terms of the coding, I guess they did adhere to it. You'll see on the top right, it's got dynamic events similar UI. The idea is the burrow keeps throwing out the mini gravelings, which we need to take out. You'll notice in terms of difficulty, it was a complete doddle there. And, well, that's going to be a bit of a recurrent thing throughout the dungeon. The staircase we're on there as well, you might recognize from being in the very first Guild Wars 2 trailer, and I always feel good running down that just because of it. Down here, there's a secret room with a mysterious bright torch. You do not have to come into this room, but if you do, you can influence the torch and spawn these ghosts. Why would you want to do that, you might ask? Well, I think back at launch, finishing that event would give you karma, and the idea was players would want any source of karma at all. That the reward structure would be such that you do events just for the sake of it. Obviously, that was a part of Legendaries. These days, I don't think there's really any need to go there whatsoever. But there we just had an example of a dynamic event that always appears and a dynamic event you can miss. And maybe if the reward integrity was still the same in the game, that would still be a valuable part of the game. It's something most people completely ignore though. Just one little hidden thing that quickly the dungeons stop doing, you'll notice. So enjoy it while we can. Devs offering side paths and hidden stuff for us to notice. Just spawning some ghosts there. This is the next chamber. You'll notice we passed some traps. There were some flame traps on the walls. Those still remain very deadly even to this day. As you'll notice, we're killing spiders extremely easily here, but the traps will still pretty much one-shot you. Here as well, you can do a sneaky jump. I thought I'd just show. This takes us back into the story mode path that we're not actually meant to be at. A lot of the time, the devs drop invisible walls in the dungeons whenever people break out of them using jumps, but on that one, they haven't. And in fact, the idea of jumping kind of was something the devs struggled with a ton in dungeons, just because players found ways to get around the content they'd made in way more ways than they'd anticipated. The first big boss, you'll actually remember, is referenced in that early press. It's a Spider Queen. She's actually still really dangerous and possibly the hardest boss, in my opinion, in this entire dungeon. You'll see how much damage I've taken from her. She drops these big poison fields you need to stand away from. And if you're in a coordinated group, you can burst her out and she basically does nothing. But if she gets a couple of animations out, she can definitely hurt a lot. I had to run away and just fight the small spiders. She's triggered by killing the baby spiders in that room. So as long as you leave a couple of small spiders alive, the queen will never get angry and will never come at you. The next room here is this long hallway. You'll notice that we were here in story mode. This was just before we met Air, but now, instead of there being any ghosts, nearly all of those spawns have been replaced with gravelings. And now we get a fairly divergent group. One thing I struggled with at launch was recognizing how dangerous an enemy was by looking at the ring, the graphical artistic ring around their face on the health bar. So you see this one we're fighting right now, this Stalker had a gold ring about him. That meant he was a champion and thus more deadly. If they have a silver ring, then they're probably an elite. And if they have, you know, a bronze ring, they're veterans, pretty easy to kill. No ring at all, then they're going to be just a trash mob. Understanding those very small elements of the UI was something that I really missed back in the day. And you'll see there's some super deadly spiders later that don't look deadly unless you know how to read the UI. So here we move up another trap corridor. And at the far side there are these two gargoyle heads you're meant to break. And once you've broken them, you can pull this chain that disables the traps behind you, thus allowing your team to come up. I think the devs had an idea here that the whole team would move up through the trap corridor together, but most of the time you just let one person teleport or shadow step higher up, pull the switch, and then you can kind of skip the sequence altogether.
You heard Crest. Hold the line. Send the intruders to Crypt.
Back into the room where we found Magdea and took out Adalburn, you'll find a new boss, Lieutenant Koga, who is offering dialogue, repeating what he used to say in Guild Wars 1, as so many ghosts do, stuck in their eternal fury against the Char. Koga's a really fun fight that is, again, one of the harder bosses in the whole dungeon, but is actually optional. We're killing him to get a waypoint deep in the dungeon that will help us move around, and if we die, basically function as a respawn. You're going to see me fight Koga 3 times, because we're going to fight him every time we get back into this big chamber, depending on which path we chose. But here you notice I've gone downstate largely because of the ads he spawned. As Koga hits various health thresholds, 75%, 50%, and 25%, he spawns allies that will fight with him. Usually you can blow them up very quickly. But on this occasion, they got to do a little bit of damage. He has some other very brutal animations I'll talk about later. So yeah, Koga dies and he spawns this chest, which I actually auto-looted. I'm going to go into my options in a second and turn that off so that you can actually see me opening the chest as proper. Here in 2019, these chests give you unidentified gear. That's actually a very new change. They used to give you lots of greens and blues, but what it means is your inventory doesn't get too spammed with items now. So at this point, because we went with Hodgins, it's this southern door that opened, leading into this new room. Had we picked Death or Zark, we wouldn't be here. So we enter a new place, the Archive of the Resting. Kind of a dangerous staircase there with lots of traps. I use my sword too to skip down. And we come to this long table, and we're looking for a scepter.
This must be the Archive of the Resting. Many great mages of Nolani Academy are buried here. They're usually buried with their writings. And if they were special, a flaming scepter. Keep those gravelings off me. I'm working as fast as I can.
This is actually some really nice lore. We never knew that flaming scepters were buried with proficient mages of the Nolani Academy before. Nolani, of course, being a place from Guild Wars 1 we visit early too. Nowadays, 250 years later, it is obviously in Char territory, but still visitable up in the Diessa Plateau. We visited some of the Char Faraz that are there now. So a place of learning for humans and a place of learning for the Char too. This next sequence, once again, is technically coded as a dynamic event, but will always happen exactly the same way with no variance. You have a series of graveling burrows to break. Now, every time you destroy one, another one appears in the room, spewing more and more out. If you don't do it quick enough, the gravelings will swarm you and the ramp will be too much to deal with, thus killing Hodgins, putting him into downstate. You fail, and then you have to revive him and try again. This is actually a really hard event. Even in 2019, with a poor group, you can struggle here, as the team needs to split up effectively to go to the orange crosses you can see on the minimap and break the burrows as soon as possible. There you saw my team did it pretty good, but it even today can be a bit of a struggle, which is nice, I think. It's in line with what they were trying to do, make hard content that you can already see is generally not hard.
The archives say there's a hidden switch that will let us into the weapons storeroom. Found it! Go check the upper section. I'll search down here.
This is a nice little room with an almost pointless waypoint we unlock. We need to climb up and pull a switch. Quite often players will teleport up and hit the switch, just one player will, while everybody else goes back to the Lieutenant Koga waypoint. So you kind of miss this room altogether. But there's some fun stuff going on. I like the little bit of platforming.
You got it. Remarkable. Beautiful. I can feel it humming with energy.
And we can claim the scepter from within here before then moving on to a totally different area of the dungeon for another one. There is an Easter egg here. Massive fans of mine and real geeks for Guild Wars will know about this. But there's a super hidden room where after claiming the scepter from the coffin, if you continue to climb up, you can do some really tricky jumps, and you'll see here, I'm struggling playing as a big, bulky Char character. Tyrix is just a bit too big for me. You can do these really tricky jumps across these beams in a very inconsequential back corner of the dungeon to find... Well, here, let me show you how I skip doing the jumping by using Savage Leap instead. There's mossy wall, and you can climb through this to get to the famous turkey room. Or, I don't know, it's pretty obscure. Maybe it's not famous. Some dev added all of these. I actually think this is genuinely one of the rarest, like, most hidden things in the game. It's so hard to see that there's even a hole in that wall. Look, it's basically imperceptible. And the flow of the dungeon doesn't have you lingering here for very long. But yeah, a lot of little turkeys, and you'll notice some small hidden things in the dungeons like that. You may not know, but the devs were planning on having jumping puzzles, full jumping puzzles, in every single dungeon. And we'll check out the Ascalon Catacombs one in a totally different area later. So, moving back up north now, we are going to come back to the Lieutenant Koga room. As I explained, we could waypoint here. One of my players in my party got downed by the flames back there, you'll notice. And as long as and then somebody else did, trying to revive. If someone is in combat in dungeons, it stops anyone being able to waypoint. That's kind of the devs' attempt at stopping graveyard rushes being a thing. In the meantime, though, I move forward. You'll see there's a bunch of grubs here. I'm pretty sure the idea for the devs was that you shouldn't really be soloing stuff like this, but all these grubs are basic enemies, and so pretty comfortable for me to take out. You'll notice where some of the story content took place, once again, instead of ghosts, there are just gravelings wandering everywhere. So I'm not going to go towards those. They'll obviously be a lot more dangerous. Here, over on the right, we've got another selection of them. The team catches up with me at this point, and I can cleave them down. Moving along into the next room, if you stand in the wrong place, which is straight on the beaten path, you'll actually spawn a ton of ooze. Look at this. See, we move into Rockfall Chamber. I stand here and a bunch of ooze appears. This is a very Guild Wars 1 kind of pop-up mechanic. You don't see much of in Guild Wars 2. And they appear behind you as though to lock you in and maybe threaten you. They can actually be avoided if you take a sneaky left route around the pillar, which a lot of experienced players do actually still do to this day.
Ah, the reliquary of the King's Guards. My notes are unambiguous. There's a scepter here. It's not here. Just a broken piece. Those wretched graveling scavengers must have taken it. I can reassemble it, but I'll need more pieces. 5 should do it. I'll stay here and prepare a workspace. Go hunt some graveling scavengers for the missing pieces. They're probably north of here in the Great Hall, picking it clean. Knowledge is the greatest treasure.
So this is the first time we hear about a place called the Great Hall. It features in a couple of the explorable paths. Hodgins is going to take his time now walking very slowly to another little area of the room where he'll become an NPC who he can deposit items to. Once again, just like in dynamic events you find in the open world. He says, have you found any other scepter pieces yet? Looks like we're looking for 5, but unlike in the open world where the number of items to recover is dynamic based on the number of players around, because this is just meant to be 5 players all the time, it will always just be 5. Also, the event itself is not random, it will always appear, and the position that the scepters appear in the Great Hall, the scepter pieces appear in the Great Hall, is also completely static. So the result is, once again, despite the fact we technically are doing dynamic events, they're events that don't reward karma and are basically just delivering the core dungeon path. The hall here, you'll notice as we round the corner, is utterly swarmed. And while you can, in theory, destroy every single enemy in here and spend a ton of time, it's better to split the team up, rush to the various nests that are around, find the scepter piece that's there. There's basically one in each corner of the room. You'll see me grabbing this one here. Grab it by pressing F and then run away. You'll notice there I pick it up, I dodge roll, and I charge out. We have 5 players. And there's 4 in that room. The first one, obviously, was the entrance you saw me get already. And with that, you can kind of be done very quickly. As long as people don't get in combat, too, they can waypoint out super fast as soon as you hand them back into Hodgins. So you could say that this is kind of a cheesy idea where players skip, but there's a little bit of risk involved. And I like moments where players get to split apart.
For knowledge?
Here he says, excellent. That's enough to work the spell. Stand back while I restore them.
Okay, stand back. This will only take a moment. Good as new. Almost. It shouldn't explode, at least. That's good enough, right?
Awesomely, you'll see he's now wielding them. Dual-wielding scepters, something players can't do.
Not a moment too soon. That sounded like it came from the western chambers. Let's head there.
The scepter skins are available, though. It's a skin called Ember Spire, a rarely dropping exotic, and actually one of the first exotics I ever got in the game. Here from this chest, you'll notice I got a tonic called a Ghostly Tonic. I equipped this to show it off to you guys. I think you're meant to have a ghostly blue effect on you while under the effects of this, like an Ascalonian, but ever since launch, it's not done that, so we just look like a dude that's supposed to be ghostly. Kind of bad. If you don't get these via luck from these chests, and remember, tonics were really fun things in Guild Wars 1, so it makes sense the devs added them as rewards in dungeons in Guild Wars 2, even though they might now seem a little bit underwhelming. If you don't get it from being lucky in chests, you can spend your currencies from the dungeon once we finish the path to get them in a guaranteed way. So, now Hodgins is telling us to find the Patriarch itself. He heard a tunnel collapse to the west, and, well, we're looking here now where a ton of gravelings have burst out and a new path has opened. But let me pause for a second to give you a bit of really fascinating trivia. So far, we've collected 2 flaming scepters, and we can see that he's got them equipped. But at the start of the path, if you remember I pointed out, he was unspecific about how many scepters he'd want to take out the Patriarch. He just said several. So here's a crazy interesting thing reliant on a bug I need to explain. In Ascalon Catacombs, you have the 3 main NPCs, Dether, Zark, and Hodgins. If you choose their path, they'll follow you around. If you don't choose their path, they stay at the camp. But here's a funny thing. If you get them killed at the camp by luring those gravelings on the staircase at that initial burrow up to them, when you revive them from downstate after they've died, their AI will change. And instead of staying idle at the camp, they'll walk around with you, even though you never chose their path. This bugs the game in an incredible amount of ways, some even beneficial, allowing you to basically merge the explorable paths together and get extra rewards. It was a method and bug that's been available since 2012, but took several years for the player base to really catch on and do often. But it's not really the extra rewards side of the bug I'm interested in. What I want to point out is something, in my opinion, far cooler. If you use this technique to get Hodgins to follow you on one of the other adventures, you can move Hodgins into rooms that this path would never normally have you go to. And surprisingly, if you take Hodgins to one of these places he shouldn't be, it triggers hidden, half-implemented dialogue players would never normally see, proving there was actually meant to be more to this path than was implemented in the end, as Hodgins can be made to look for a 3rd scepter in the tomb we defeated Kasha Blackblood in story mode. Check it out.
Kasha's tomb. One of her subordinates buried. I don't know which subordinate, unfortunately, so we may have to search all the sarcophagi.
So, there you have it. Some half-implemented dialogue you were never meant to hear. Excuse the spoilers about the actual path we're on here. We'll get to that in just a moment. But once you've done this, Hodgins will actually bug. There is no event to get the scepter. He'll just walk in circles around this statue of Grenth. But I get the gist of what the devs probably wanted us to do. Search the room and press F on a ton of the coffins, probably. Fun stuff, and a little glimpse into the way the game is coded.
Knowledge is the greatest treasure.
Back to Path 1 being played properly. We're in the last leg now. To kill the Howling Queen is our objective. They'll be found at the end of this long corridor that's actually swarmed with enemies. This does remind me a little bit of Ergos and some of those trap-infested corridors from Eye of the North dungeons, and honestly it's quite a dangerous place. For many years, the technique of the player base in this corridor would be to stealth up and run through the room before your stealth ran out, thus skipping all of the enemies while dodge rolling the traps. And if that sounds kind of tricky, it's because honestly, I think it sort of was. This was one of those really punishing rooms where experienced dungeon players would get frustrated with new players, as they would be expected to charge through here alone and not know how to perfectly dodge and what traps to expect, as well as navigating the fairly labyrinthine corridors. They will notice the breeders, the gravelings in general, sorry, do have very high damage knockbacks that I'm failing to dodge myself, even with the team and us going slowly. So yeah, this room, definitely I think players were quite punishing to newbies in. So we run through, and we get some more breeders. Interesting little thing about these groups is if it's only a breeder, quite often when you aggro them, their immediate instinct will be to spawn enemies that don't attack you for a little while. So quite often the groups look really dangerous, but like this swarm here, you can just walk through. No dodges, no swiftness, no nothing, and you'll have time to get safely by. As long as, you know, you're the first one aggroing. The people following behind you will obviously get caught. So yeah, we're just killing our way through. This area of the dungeon, I'll note, if you look at my minimap, there's lots of tunnels around. And they're all optional. They're all completely ignorable. There are no quests or hidden, you know, NPCs that will speak to you in them. Though we get an idea from the developer comments before the game came out why they might exist, that they were planning on implementing that content at some time. I'll give you a bit of a tour of them in a second. Here's the final boss, the Howling King. He has Scream armor, supposedly, and he summons allies. So how this fight works is Hodgins will summon these giant fire rings in the ground. You can see there's one near the boss here. They actually do burning damage to us, so a bit of friendly fire there. But the idea is as you fight the Howling King, which at launch balance took a while, all these scavengers would start coming in. You'll notice they're all elites. They do tons of damage. So the group's job is to stand in Hodgins' fire ring, and whenever the additional enemies walk into them, they instantly die. So that's how the boss is meant to be fought. These days, you can break his break bar and burn him down before any of it's really relevant. But yeah, you were meant to hide in the fire rings, not touching them too much yourself because of friendly fire, and that would clear the mobs.
I knew such great weapons of the past would be useful. Neither Ghost nor Graveling will pose a problem for the Durman Priory. To be honest, I was worried. I didn't know if the Howling King could be killed. Because of you, our camp is that much safer. Many thanks for your work down here.
And so there you go. That's one path done. We get our rewards, which includes Imperial Fragments, Experience, a bit of gold, and Tears of Ascalon, or Ascalon Tears. You get 2 separate chests. One is for daily, the other is repeatable. In total, we got 100 tears from that, as well as loot from the boss itself. And that's the path cleared. Hodgins won't actually have any extra dialogue for us. It's very thin on the ground. And the scepters that he's recovered here never really become a thing afterwards. What I'm showing you now, we could leave the dungeon. You'll notice above my minimap there's an exit instance button that's glowing. We could leave the dungeon, but what I'm showing you now is at the back of the room, a big unimplemented jumping puzzle, a bit like the turkey room that was hidden. Here you can see, this one's much more well known. People would often come up here. You can come into this whole corridor back here. Again, much like the tunnels leading up to the Howling King, totally devoid of NPCs or content. And there's this huge chasm. It's a really fun room, and one of my earliest disappointments with the game was beating this jumping puzzle. In the early days, not knowing movement very well and jumping made this feel quite dangerous and scary, only to not get a reward or anything at the end. It was very disappointing. But the idea is almost Indiana Jones style. You've got these half-invisible planks. Is it Indiana Jones, or am I getting that wrong? Anyway, some old adventure movie. And we got to move along, and the dust has fallen on the planks in just some slight areas, giving you a slight hint as to where we can walk, and you can move over to the other side of the chamber. Talking back about the boss for a second as well there, you'll notice he was a complete pushover, died very fast. He had another animation, which was this big scream. He's the Howling King. It applies conditions and you can sort of sidestep it. But we slaughtered him even easier than, say, it took us to kill the Spider Queen or some of the other encounters that went along. And it was all pretty easy. That's pretty much the state of dungeons in 2019. There was a big update around 2015 or 14 that adjusted how ferocity scales in these dungeons, and it kind of made things really, really easy, such that that design goal of this wasn't necessarily something pugs could easily do, well, they can. And for the rest of the dungeon series, that's going to be true. You've seen basically a whole path now, and there won't be any major deviations in difficulty for a long time. It means that dungeons are not what they originally thought that they would be aiming for, but if you're a new player to Guild Wars 2, they're definitely something you can look at to play and not be too intimidated by. Further to this, in truth, even before the ferocity scaling change, dungeons had become a pushover by players that had learned how to competently do them. Coming out of Guild Wars 1, ArenaNet, frankly, was an inexperienced studio when dealing with things like players that could jump and break pathing of NPCs, move in areas of the maps that they weren't meant to go in. They were unexperienced in handling a PvE game with stealth in it, and totally underestimated how much players would be able to just walk through while invisible and not have to participate in the content. They had made a game that didn't have body blocking anymore, where players actually bump into one another physically. Interviews over the years have revealed this was done mainly to address networking issues and things like rubber banding, which happened in Guild Wars 1, but it had a profound effect on dungeon combat, where players were now stacking together much more tightly and reaping the benefits of their point-blank AoE buffs provided through the new combo field system. The devs just didn't add enough counter pressure in the form of AoE to split players apart and create the combat that was as dynamic and difficult as they were perhaps hoping. Another profound misfire from ArenaNet was animation and combat speed, leaving players able to execute much more abilities much faster than the enemies they were facing. In Guild Wars 1, player combat was lagged down by significant aftercasts and long cast times, but in Guild Wars 2, and especially over the years, everything is much more free-flowing than that. Now that's fun and nice to execute, but it means that, say, the ghosts and gravelings we're fighting here just can't keep up with the mountain of skills being executed against them, while they themselves are stuck with just one auto attack every 2 seconds or so. Even the dodge roll mechanic, a fundamental new addition to Guild Wars 2, and the evade and invulnerable frames that it offered the players was something ArenaNet didn't have any experience properly balancing, and it left their lofty design goals of challenging, interesting dungeons far, far away from what we really got. You can make the argument this is stuff that should have been updated post-release, and to a certain extent they did try that somewhat, but I think the whys and wherefores there will have to be a story for another time. In truth, dungeons didn't get better after release. Power creep in terms of new gear that people could get, just general stat creep from the balance team, as well as the aforementioned ferocity scaling changes. All of that has served even further to only ebb away at what they were originally trying. So these days, ignorant and new players could be forgiven for thinking that Dungeons was meant to be casual content. And hey, maybe that's okay, since they added raids and fractals and other juicy things we'll get to in the long future. All that said, we're now ready for Path 2. You'll notice we've got back to Detha, who's telling us her plan, and she actually has a lot of dialogue. She says these two don't realize what the Ghost Eater represents. A new, dangerous foe we don't know anything about. We need to go down there and kill it. We could say, well, what's so dangerous about a graveling that eats ghosts? As long as it eats them, you're safe, right? And she says, well, that's what those fools keep saying. The problem is we don't know anything about it. What if it can phase through walls like ghosts? We'd be defenseless. We say, well, what's your plan? She says it's simple. I plant bait, gravelings come, you annihilate them with turrets and focus on the patriarch while it shows its ugly face. Okay, so what do we use for bait? She says, I can craft it out of pheromones of graveling females. And how do we do that? Well, gravelings have been invading the catacombs for centuries, so there are a lot of defenses built to kill them. The southeast section still has working ones. So we're going to go get some bait. And we've also got extra information here. We can say, what's the difference between the gravelings? She says, well, regular ones knock you down and try and rip your legs off. The others are nastier. And you can ask about each variant. Scavengers will knock you down and tear into your entrails with sharp teeth. Stalkers will burrow underground and pop up beneath you. Watch for signs of re-emergence and move fast. Oh yeah, they're also poisonous. And they're actually some of the challenging ones. Pillagers vomit flaming bile and grave rot. It will burn a hole right through your armor, skin, and bones, so don't linger in it. Pillagers I don't really recognize as seeing much, if ever, really. Breeders will knock you down like the others, but they also spawn tiny and vicious versions of the full-grown gravelings. So Detha goes on this information here. And I think it's kind of interesting that maybe all the dungeons could have had an NPC talking about the challenges upcoming, but they often don't. So yeah, that's basically her plan and all the dialogue we can exhaust. So let's go over to Shrill and this time vote for Detha. Obviously you'd want to agree in comms with your group that that's what you want to do, and we move back through.
Excellent choice. Let's get to work.
So the question on your mind now will be, just how different is this explorable path?
Do you hear that? Sounds like... Damn it! Another graveling mound. Close it before they overrun the camp. We'll guard the entrance.
And, well, the truth is, honestly, not all that different, at least for the start here. We will see. Now we've got Detha following us. She has her own combat skills, but most NPCs, even as we saw in the personal story, are tuned to basically not interact with the game whatsoever. She has, like, permanent stability, I think, as an NPC, but not much else is really going on beyond that. So we're going to travel through. You're going to find that the Spider Queen once again spawns in exactly the same place, in exactly the same way. There'll be the same enemies in exactly the same place, exactly the same way. These traps, by the way, while it's red, spikes come up on you. We'll see those later. They appear in a lot of the dungeons. Things won't actually be different until we reach Koga. Had Detha been, and the NPCs we have with us, been more active participants in combat, like we often saw in Guild Wars 1 they could be, maybe these early sections would feel different as the flow of the fights went differently, but that's obviously not a bit of a thing. And here I want to mention another interesting thing about how dungeons went. In those early statements, you'll notice the devs kind of had an idea where it seemed dungeons would be so long and arduous and difficult that you could could spend several hours in one path, and maybe you'd only do like one path a day. And the point was that you'd go into the dungeon and choose which path you want. They'd all be of roughly equal difficulty. Experience that. And then you'd probably leave for a while and come back later, this time picking a different path, and it's different enough that it doesn't wear on you as being tedious or too repetitive. But here you'll notice we just did one path, and now and it was pretty quick and easy because of all the combat stuff we just talked about. And now we're immediately moving on and doing path 2. And so there's an interesting consequence of how players consumed dungeons I don't think the devs were quite anticipating. And that's that people basically just did all the paths every day, and they got rewarded for each path every day. I'm being encouraged right now to do path 2 because I'll get more tiers of Ascalon from it, and the devs are happy to do that because they want me to keep playing the game. But the consequence is, the whole point of the separate path system was to stop the game feeling the same all the time and tedious. But in truth, because of the way we consume the dungeons, we are going to see the same thing every time, because we're going to do this path every day, and then we're going to do path 2 every day, and then we're going to do path 3 every day, and all that really changes is in what order we choose to do the dungeon paths in. And that's true for the Ascalon Catacombs. That's going to be true for the other paths as well in the other dungeons too. And so the whole kind of concept sort of broke down. Interesting. Well, so here we've got Koga, and we can see his mechanics. Last time I talked about how he spawns new enemies. Here you can see he's got ghost storms as well, or maybe that's his allies doing it. But there in the background, you'll see he's doing a big charge-up attack that I'm hiding behind this pillar to avoid. He basically does an ability very similar to what thieves can do, called Dagger Storm. But what he'll do is he'll charge up, he'll throw out some projectiles that if you get hit with it and don't dodge correctly, they pull you into him, and then he spins in place, doing epic damage around him. It's a really fun mechanic, and one of the coolest aspects of this boss. If you don't know about it, he can wipe the group, but when you do know about it and you learn, you can avoid it. Very much in the spirit of really good game design, I think, that Guild Wars was going for. And Koga is probably the most deadly boss in this path, as long as you don't know about that.
Progress turn.
So, this time, when we get into this hall, you'll see on our mini-map that a different door has opened. We are not going into the southern room with the long table where Hodgins took us. Instead, we're coming here to find bait. This is probably my favorite area of the Ascalon Catacombs we're about to travel to, because it's a recognizable location from the Guild Wars 1 version of the dungeon. Yes, if you guys don't know, at the very beginning of Guild Wars 1, you do actually come into this place. If you're a Necromancer player, some of the first skills you learn in the entire game in the tutorial area are here in this catacomb. And if you're a monk, you come here as well. Well, you may remember a very distinctive kind of flooded corridor you walk through. We're about to go back to that flooded corridor 250 years later. The devs obviously took some liberties in terms of the layout and artistic design of the place, but some chambers are deliberately made to look just like they looked in Guild Wars 1, and we're about to visit one. Here, by the way, is a dead-end corridor that most players will never come into. I just ran down here to show it off to you all. As you walk through, there is a hidden spawn of spiders. Again, players don't really come here because there's no reason to. Is this a correct execution of what the devs wanted with random dynamic stuff in dungeons?
What?
I don't know, I guess it's up to you guys, but I think the only players that would ever come here are total new players that don't know how to follow the clearly marked waypoint on their mini-map telling them exactly where to go, and they walk into that corridor getting lost, and then, oh, there's some enemies. Here are the spiders I mentioned earlier. By clicking them, you'll see they have yellow rings around them, meaning they're elites. I mean, you click them, they're called elites as well, quite frankly, so it's pretty obvious. But they look like very small basic spiders. They're actually super deadly or dangerous, as they were maybe a little bit more at launch. I actually remember wiping against those spiders and unable to kill them at the very release of the game. These days, oof, they just kind of get destroyed. Down here is a hint of a Graveling burrow that I think might sometimes randomly spawn. And there are some random events, in fact, one very specific one I'll talk about in Path 3. But now it seems mostly empty. Here, we're at the Flooded Temple. This is the Flooded Corridor from Guild Wars 1. It's a fantastic place. Over here is a sneaky side passage into the Hodgins room. But as far as I remember, that door never really opens up and you can't interact with it in any major way. But check it out! This is such a recognizable vista from that first game. We walk up to the tilted Grent statue, this time with a Char next to us. Char who were not free to be here in the past at the altar of Grent. for our first big sequence on the Death Path.
According to my research, the original Ascalonians would lure gravelings into death traps like this. If this works, we'll have enough pheromones from the female corpses to lure out the Ghost Eater. Here's the plan. There are switches surrounding the stairs. Each one controls a different spike trap. I'll lure the gravelings out of the water into this room, but they'll be coming straight for me. You need to fire off a trap when they come, and do it right. I don't like using myself for bait.
So, this is a pretty fun sequence. We get these chains around, marked by the cogs, and when you press F on them, it sends some spikes up out in the water. We're going to be flooded with billions of gravelings that the spikes will instantly kill. And we have two objectives. One to just kill lots of hatchlings, and the other one to kill a big boss that's going to spawn in just a second. So, the 5 players can get on these and press them.
Reader incoming!
This is the way that the devs planned for players to beat the encounter with good timing. But in truth, most people now just wander out into the water and just kill all the mobs there. Here you'll notice the big breeder, the champion, is coming in. This one's immune to traps and must be killed through regular combat. Kind of tricky, actually. I'm not sure I like this too much. If you're a new player doing this, you're going to try the spikes. You're going to use them to your best of your ability, and then this big guy's going to come, and you're going to try and, like, lure him into the spikes to kill him.
Stop letting them through.
You're not going to have any really good indication that he's immune to the spikes or whatever, and probably wipe. But the idea is to keep Deather alive. You kill the big one, and you see we've got 2 bars on the top right. One to kill the breeder, which we've just killed, and the other one to kill smaller gravelings, which we're about to finish, just by beating them up by standing in the middle here, as you see we've resorted to doing. Once they're all down, you've got the bait.
You can't run forever.
So, Deather doesn't really have any dialogue once this event finishes, as you noticed there.
The wheel of progress turns.
She can bug here very easily too, and something else that's strange is the reward chest for beating this mini encounter. By the way, one thing I haven't mentioned is we get tears at the very end, loads of them, but you get small amounts of tears as you play through from these small chests.
Okay, that's enough bait. Let's go.
This chest here actually gives you really weird loot. You'll notice we got bloodstone dust from it and other strange things. It seems when champion bags were added to the game, this chest for some reason got updated to have champion bag loot in it. And what that means is you can sometimes get really rare and strange stuff from that chest you wouldn't elsewhere. Some of the loot that you often get in this dungeon is garlic bread, and I nearly always get it from that chest, weirdly. But yeah, it's strange and doesn't seem to be coded like any others. Maybe the devs were playing around with the concept of champion bags there early and it just leaked into the code. It's been like it for years, though. So, there you saw we hit a loading screen and just teleported. That's because we used the waypoint we unlocked from killing Lieutenant Koga. Again, Koga can actually be skipped. It's just the convenience of getting that waypoint if you're good enough to kill him and you know how to dodge his big dagger storm style ability. We move up here and the path will actually end in the northern chamber, the Great Hall. We saw that in P1, but this time we return to it from a different route. Our entrance is up these stairways directly north that Hodgins didn't know how to open up. So again, just a slightly different flavor, but nonetheless the same room. This time as well, however, when we came here with Hodgins, the room was swarmed with gravelings, but this time they won't be there yet, and things will change just a little. So we're going to move up. There's another hidden ooze spawn at the top of this staircase as we enter the Great Hall. You'll notice there's a chain that we can pull. It's a good idea to try and clear all of these monsters out for what it's worth before charging in there too early. Players these days skip most of this stuff, but if Deather aggroes a bit weirdly as she walks into this room, she can bug. I've done these dungeons more than enough time to know pretty much any of the random little bugs and pitfalls that can appear here. So you see my inventory's filled up. We do get unidentified gear, as I said, which stacks all into one slot in your inventory instead of lots of little ones until you double click it, which is nice, but there's still a wider range of items you can get. And so, Deather moves in, and you'll see there's now 3 turrets here.
I had scouts drop off the parts I needed to build the traps, but I have to build them myself.
Char. It's building some nefarious device. Surely the vanguard of an invasion. Brothers and sisters, to arms! For Ascalon!
Wonderful. Keep them off my back and away from the traps.
So this is the next event. You'll see on the top right, we've got 3 traps, and they all have health bars that are currently empty. Deather will physically walk over to them, start hammering her away, and you can look very carefully at the animation. It's really nice. The traps will actually build. They look like they're of Asuran design, so I wonder if this was supposed to be like Sark related somehow at some point, but then they ended up just having it as a char thing, or maybe they'd never build it. But what Deather will do is build half of the trap, then for some reason have a change of heart and go to the next one and build half of that, and then the next one and build half. So she has to complete the circuit twice, basically. There are some ways you can trick this out by letting Deather die while she's hammering, then revive her, and when she gets back up, she'll forget that she was supposed to change her mind, and she'll build the whole thing in one go. That was always a nice little technique to use. But the general way we're playing this is what the devs really wanted, I guess, which is just to grind through it and wait for her to do the whole loop. The ghosts spawn in waves as she hammers. Sometimes they're in positions that you can easily drag them together and blow them up, but sometimes they're a little bit too spread for that, and they can be a lot more tricky. Ultimately, it doesn't matter too much if they kill Deather. Just revive her once the wave is dealt with, and you should be okay. Speaking of the ghosts themselves, yeah, the ghosts of Ascalon do actually appear in this dungeon. They're not all eaten by the Gravelings. Just because we got rid of the king before, it doesn't mean all ghosts have disappeared. And I really like the story beat the devs are going for here. The Deather, a char, is trying to kill a patriarch eating the ghosts, but just because, which, you know, the ghost should want, but just because she's a char, they're blind and they can't think, they you know, want to stop her and they want to fight her. Like, it's quite ironic that they're trying to kill her and she's doing more good for them than they realize. And yeah, I probably wouldn't have been able to resist the temptation to do this if I was in the writing room for a story like this as well. So yeah, they're just gonna run around and get all the traps. We'll move into the next phase.
The cannon traps are set. Tell me when to plant the bait.
So, this is going to be the final boss now as we fight the next Patriarch. You'll realize it's not in the same chamber this time. It's out here in the Great Hall. But the mechanics here are actually really nuanced and interesting. If the boss wasn't so squishy, it would be one of my favorite bosses in the game. So we've got the traps, but to charge the traps up, we need to use these guns. So you get 2 skills. You can pick them up. The anti-spectral ordnance. You've got lift ectoplasm and pull ectoplasm. So when the boss spawns, we're going to shoot it with the gun, and it's going to drop all this ectoplasmic ooze. They're enemies. And when we have the enemies spawning, we can use the guns to lift them up into the air in range of the turrets, and that will charge the turrets. So one player can use the skill 1 to lift an enemy. The other player can use skill 2 to pull it into the trap. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Deather says that the traps are absorbing and weaponizing electoplasmic energy. That when the traps are full, we can discharge them in a burst, and that should be potent enough to hammer the Ghost Eater. And she says there's a recharge rate on the trap, so you can't just fire them all the time. Keep it in mind. And with that, we can spawn the boss.
It must really want that bait. Here it comes.
So, when he spawns, you'll notice he has an active effect on him that basically means he's invulnerable. The only way to stop him being invulnerable is to do this trap mechanic. So here I am using the skill 1, creating that yellow beam, and that's spawning this ectoplasmic ooze. Now, my teammates are also using the yellow beams. While the oozes are in range of the trap, you can see that there's a vague white ring around the trap there. And once you get 3 oozes in it, it will charge the trap up, which we just did. The trap will explode, and now the boss is vulnerable. So we're actually trying to damage him really slowly here so that we can just show you the mechanic again, because it's so easy to miss and confusing to new players, basically. By the way, there's a chest near here from finishing the previous event, which I'll collect in a second. So again, once you've done the trap, eventually the Ghost Eater will become invulnerable again, and you need to move to a new area. You'll notice he's also got these very dangerous AoEs here that I'm dodging through, and actually managed to get one of our players down. There was a beautiful elixir R there to res him up. So we all run through, right? We go to the new trap. The idea is to charge the trap. We grab the gun. Use the skill 1 from the gun to create the yellow beam and spawn oozes, which you can see one of our teammates just did. You grab the oozes and pull them into the traps by using the skill 1 to lift them up, and another player can use the skill 2 to create a green beam and pull them in. When both beams are on a single ooze, you can move them, and we're going to try and pull them into a trap. Describing this out loud now makes me realize just how complicated this probably is to learn in an instance. So there you go. We just charged the trap once because one of us used the yellow beam on an ectoplasmic ooze while it was next to the trap. So you can use the yellow beams to lift them and charge the trap, and the green beams to pull them while there's also a yellow beam. So hopefully that makes sense. We've still only got one charge, so here, we're trying to pull an ooze into it. There you go. We just managed to get another one. So now it's charged a second time. You can look at the top right to see the power level of the trap right now. And now all we have to do is lift the final ooze. There you go. The trap's been charged. The animation for the trap is triggered, and the Ghost Eater is no longer vulnerable. So we can now do damage and blow it up. This time we'll actually kill it. And yeah, there you go. That's the mechanics. Very contrived boss fight. Kind of difficult to read, but there you have it.
A good trap works any day. Wait until Hodgins and Zark find out about this.
And there you go. That's all we get for the dialogue. It's really thin on the ground. I wonder if the devs were curious about having like an epilogue sort of sequence, a mini thing where the NPCs go back to camp and there's some conclusory dialogue. But in the end, that got cut for time, and because they realized the flow of the gameplay was a bit weird, asking players to return to the camp, and the dialogue ended up suffering. So with this dungeon path done, you'll notice I got an extra reward where I get to pick another dungeon currency. For beating this dungeon here, Ascalon Catacombs, I just got the choice of getting dungeon rewards from any of the dungeons. That's because for every 8 explorable paths you do that are unique, so they have to be different ones. You can't just do the same explorable path over and over. Do 8 different ones. You get a bonus reward of even more currency. That was another new update that in the recent years. It means that if you really suck at, say, Twilight Arbor, the 3rd dungeon, you can keep doing Ascalon Catacombs, and very slowly you can get Twilight Arbor rewards instead. They just keep doing things to make the game as free and easy for people as possible, so you don't have to do dedicated content for dedicated rewards. A philosophy I will very often speak out against, but there you have it. Alright, so there you go. That's 2 paths. All we have left now is path 3 to do the Asura's story. So that's going to be Sark, and we'll move on over. So here he is, and he says, "My colleagues remain ignorant. The Graveling Patriarch they need to worry about is Colossus Rumblus." I love the name of that. "Fortunately for everyone, I have the ideal method for its defeat. What's your plan?" Finally, someone will listen to reason. "First, we gather ghostly essence. Then, I reverse the process to coat us in spirit energy, effectively making us ghosts." And we say, hold on, don't you have to be dead to be a ghost? He says, "Negative. We'll appear as ghosts to other ghosts. However, which is vital for the second part of my genius plan, which is the ghost of Warmaster Grass lurks in the chambers beneath us. As ghost, he will recognize us as one of his kind, and we shall recruit him to kill the Patriarchs." And we say, "Increase our numbers to attack them." I like it. That's a very Char response of us there. We can say, "Tell me more about the Patriarch." He says, "I surveyed it after we set up camp here. It's a massive creature that made the ground shake as it walked. I estimated its potential energy to be similar to that of an earthquake." And we say, "But we're safely underground. What's the harm?" He says, "Do I have to use small words? Fine. Big quake-causing creature. Unstable network of catacomb tunnels. Big rock fall on us. All dead. Are we clear?" And we say, "Okay, what's your plan?" And it'll explain the other things. So the dialogue there seems to be structured that you're meant to click the bottom option first, like they've got it reversed weirdly. So yeah, path 3, Colossus Rumblus.
Excellent choice. Undeath essence awaits. To the Lover's Crypt.
And off we go again. You'll notice the other 2 paths took us to different areas Story did. Well, now we go to the next one, the Lover's Crypt.
Do you hear that?
Now, skipping ahead to the Spider Queen here, you might really be wondering again, well, how much changes? Because the Spider Queen obviously isn't a dynamic, sometimes appearing thing like the interviews early on suggested. So what else might there be? Well, in truth, Ascalon Catacombs does have one very cool mechanic that genuinely is random, and it's the idea of that cave troll Kool-Aid man Colin Johansson talked about in that interview. There is a chance, as you play this dungeon, for a random, not always occurring dynamic event with a cave troll. Basically, some of these walls might sometimes host one, and they'll burst out an explosion of rubble and attack you. There are 4 or 5 different spawn points in the dungeon where the cave troll could appear, and so sometimes when playing the dungeon you get it, sometimes you don't. For example, when you load into the dungeon, if the RNG determines that the cave troll is hiding behind a certain wall, and then you don't pick the path that would take you towards that wall, well, you missed the cave troll on that run. The cave troll's kind of interesting as well in that it's not allied with the other things in the dungeon. This is something we saw Guild Wars 1 did on fair occasion, and that means that if you spawn the cave troll, you can drag it over to this Graveling Stalker we're fighting right now, or Lieutenant Koga, and they'll fight one another. It's pretty fun. The cave troll too is really deadly. If only because it has a very spammable fear and weakness ability and very, very heavy hitting abilities. So the cave troll is an interesting one in that it's one of the only examples in all 8 dungeons of a truly random thing that sometimes appears and sometimes doesn't. But it's such a pain to kill, most people aren't happy to see it and just skip it instead. And the one place where the devs did successfully take the time to implement something they wanted to do, it annoys people more than it's something that they enjoy, right? Because there's no good reward for fighting it, and it's just kind of tricky. So, yeah, you might be wondering at this point, oh, okay, so WP in Path 3, are we going to see the cave troll? Actually, no. I played this dungeon, the paths. I did 4 paths while making this video for you guys, and amazingly, the cave troll never appeared in any. I've never had that, really. Nearly always when I do this dungeon, I end up seeing the cave troll and run past it, but I just didn't get any footage for you. You might think, oh, that's lazy, WB. You should definitely show it off. It's you know, particular content. Well, don't worry. The cave troll does appear, not random, but dedicated, in some of the future dungeons as well. In particular, one of the last dungeons will have the cave troll come back, exactly the same mechanics and everything. So we'll just show him off there later on down the road. So there, with another Koga kill, we're at the point where the dungeon will branch. We're going to go through the eastern door with Sark, and that means braving this fiery Drake breath trap here as well. A pretty sneaky one, because you can't see it easily. More spike traps here as well. We've got some of the elite spiders to deal with. But instead of going south now into the flooded corridor, we're going to come straight across the hallway here into this corridor. There's a bonus champion elite scavenger on our left that you can fight. And since the champion box update, which means most champions in the game give you a champ box, which is loot, bloodstone, dust and stuff, it can be something worth fighting. These coasts, you'll notice we do kill very, very quickly, but they have been difficult enough in the past, if you go early enough, that it was justifiable to stealth past them. And they're a perfect example of one of the many things you would sneak pop by. I managed to get away from them on just 4 health there, you'll notice. 4! Pretty goddamn nice. So, welcome to the Lover's Crypt again. This was the hardest boss to solo in story mode, and it's actually one of the more infamous rooms in Explorable.
Lovers in life, bound eternally in death. Think of the concentrated ecto-undeath distillate. Now, to set up ecto-collectors and transmit the undeath essence to my storage unit.
And not because it's difficult, but because it takes ages. Yes, this is a time-gated room. Sark is going to set up these 2 essence collectors. One's called, like, Florp or something. The other one's called... They sound like Asuri words, right? But basically near each of the crypts. And there you go, Nur and Sorp, they're called. And we got to let them charge.
The process is attracting gravelings. Well, stop them! I'll just be a few moments. Easy enough to keep them from my equipment, I imagine.
The charging takes... maybe it's like 3 minutes. Maybe it's 4 or 5. But it feels like a dreadfully long time when you're doing this every day, because the game's got us to the point where we're doing every path every day. The mechanic itself, though, were it to be difficult and tuned properly, I love. It's a ramp mechanic where these burrows keep spawning, similar to what we saw in Path 1, and they relentlessly appear in the room, and if you don't break the burrows quick enough, then more and more gravelings will come out and the room will flood and eventually the collectors will destroy. I actually remember really struggling with this at release, coming into this dungeon at level 30 with blue and green gear. These are structures, so they cannot be condition damaged or critically hit, and I remember back at launch like trying to use condition damage builds on them. I remember having a player on my team who was a dagger thief casting Death Blossom, which just would have done nothing, and we struggled for hours on it. A very long time. These days, it's kind of a nothing, and because it's a nothing, it's actually really boring. You'll see we've been in here for a while already, and we're not even 30% complete yet. You just stand around breaking the burrows. The most engaging thing about this room over the years, I have to say, is treating it as a memory test where can you remember where every single burrow will appear before the next one does. You'll see I'm taking this second to do inventory management because we'll just be standing around. A real shambles, I think. And if this kind of footage was out there in 2012, people would really have rebelled against Guild Wars 2 and the state that its dungeons had eventually been in. But these days, people don't care because the only ones still playing it are the ones that want rewards, and they'll put up with some pretty boring stuff to get them. There is another interesting underside to this room, in that quite often when ArenaNet adds a mechanic like this, they don't let it ramp too far. So you would expect this to be implemented such that if there's already 3 burrows up and your team has struggled to break them, it won't spawn anymore. It will wait until you break a burrow before doing the next one, just so things don't get too crazy. 99% of the time in the game, that's what they do. But this room, quite specially, doesn't. If you can survive it and just not kill anything, don't break any burrows, they really will keep spawning and spawning and spawning and spawning until the room is completely flush with mobs, to the point where the pressure would even be quite tricky for the power crept days of now. I always thought it'd be kind of fun to try that at some point, but I never really have, so maybe a project for a future day just to let this room totally fill up. Another thing I used to do to keep this somewhat fun is that alternate champion patrolling outside I talked about, to sneak out and try and kill that, get some extra loot while this is going on without failing the mechanic, and it's pretty simple to do. So yeah, I won't force you to watch this whole thing. We're only just halfway done. Let's skip to the end. So here we go, with the team eagerly waiting at the door we anticipate to open.
A veritable bounty of ecto-undeath distillate. Now to make us ghosts.
So, we become ghosts. There is a chest behind me, by the way. I'm going to forget to open here.
Knowledge is the greatest treasure.
Oh, no, I do remember to get it. There you go. A lot of players forget about that, or they just auto-loot it these days. But so, yeah, we become a ghost, a human ghost. We no longer look like a child whatsoever. It changes all of our animations. I really always have appreciated and liked this little moment of the dungeon, even if it's got nothing to do with the actual gameplay. And in accordance with the plan now, hiding as a ghost, we're going to try and recruit War Master Grast to our favor. We're going to find him in the Great Hall, where you remember Detha meets ghosts in the Great Hall, but I don't think it's Grast that attacks her there. The devs never went that far. That would have been really fun. If you go there with the Char, Grast attacks Detha, but if you go there with Zark, he turns you into a ghost and it'll be someone else. Maybe they missed a trick not using the same NPC. So this room here is just a filler room, a room we simply walk through. It has no content in it in any path. The only way that you'll get anything to happen in this room is, as I showed earlier, if you bug Hodgins to come in here, and you'll see a hint of an event that they once upon a time had an idea for, but then never actually got implemented. Zark doesn't even talk about it. We just wander through and come up this staircase on the far side. I think I noticed here that I didn't get this POI, which is very surprising to me, since Tyrix came here way back when. There you go, Cash's chapel. And so we'll move up and find War Master Grast in the far room. Grast does obviously appear as an NPC in the original game, and this is just another nice little nod to that. Not all the dungeons constantly do such things, but, you know, we're in Ascalon, so obviously it was going to do a lot of that. In fact, a lot of the varieties of ghosts we've been fighting here are based on Guild Wars 1 professions, but I mentioned that in story.
Thank the gods! You must be the reinforcements. It feels like we've been here for ages. Horrible creatures have overrun the hall. Drive them back immediately.
So you'll notice that the Great Hall appears in all 3 paths. Hodgins, you gather scepter pieces in here. Detha, this is where the final boss is, and you do the trap charging and the fight itself. And in path 3 we move through to clear it out of mobs. So with Hodgins, when you first arrive, it's filled with gravelings, and you can ignore them. On this path, it's not filled when you first come in. You've got to break the burrows that are responsible for spawning them. This really seems to be something of a burrow-themed path. There's a lot of burrow-related stuff in this. I think the devs might have had an idea for this, in that the burrows we fight here, 4 very particular ones, each is like a mini boss encounter kind of thing, and that these burrows are tankier than other burrows you find elsewhere in the dungeon, and this is somehow a little bit more special. Maybe they spawn more deadly stuff. But in the end, I don't think that's true. They're certainly bigger, like you can climb around on them, and their hitbox is larger. But the rest of it, doesn't really feel tuned any differently. Another fun thing about this room is, despite the fact you come into it in all 3 paths, there is a bonus exit, a collapsible wall leading to a tunnel that the devs never coded to open up in any of the sequences. So you can see it, but never go into it.
Well done. Now, we must find the leader of these creatures. It shall know the strength of an Ascalonian warhammer.
The tunnels are all obstructed at the moment, but I've discovered a structural vulnerability.
Lead the way. No barrier can stop me from defending my homeland.
My resonance cascader will dislodge the rocks blocking the Graveling tunnels. The ethereal flux oscillator indicates an open path in the next room. Let's go.
This would be the point you would expect to leave through the other exits, the collapsible wall. It's on my right as I walk past it now. But instead, the same door that was in the Hodgins path opens instead, and you just wander through that. In fact, they unlock a waypoint way deeper into the dungeon. You can just double-click to ignore doing this whole walk here. I come from my chest at least, and show you guys the proper, so to speak, way. That means that this boss and this path actually ends fighting Colossus Rumblus at the same place that the Howling King was at. Both bosses are in the same place, look exactly the same, but do have different combat abilities, and that does fall in line with what the devs talked about before. Oh, here I wanted to demonstrate that the hidden ooze spawn is in this path also, even though in this occasion we're not encouraged to walk anywhere near them. Maybe if you really care about those small fangs and venom sacs, you'd want to take them out, but I think that that's highly unlikely. Here in the boss chamber, we'll see he's patrolling in big circles. His flavor text says that he creates seismic activity, and his mechanic is honestly pretty cool. So he knocks us down. He has a break bar, which will shatter here and interrupt him, so you could probably kill him right while he's stunned there. But he does have a really awesome skill that brings the ceiling down on us. Now, if the ceiling hits you, I'll show you it in a second. There you go. He's wailing. And now he's going to start bringing the ceiling down. Now, if any of these chunks of the ceiling hit you when they start falling down, you take a massive damage, basically instantly go down and get knock blocked. But War Master Grast, whose help we have aided, will create this big blue bubble. And while standing in his bubble, the ceiling cannot hurt you. So the idea is to fight near Grast, and he as an NPC is actually important to take out the last boss. You can easily wipe on this if Grast forgets to use the animation, which sadly is a pretty frequent occurrence.
I'm grateful for your help. Let us rejoin the front lines to repel the invaders. Look for me there, brave soldiers. I would be glad to have you fighting by my side in the coming battles.
So the devs are pretty sneaky here. Obviously, we're still a ghost, so they have War Master Grast just leave on his own terms, so that then we can stop being a ghost and go back to normal all very quickly.
Considering I had no firm idea what would happen, I'd say that was a successful experiment. So tell me, how do you feel? Nauseous? Any pain in your head or feet? Can you taste colors? Never mind. I'm sure you'll survive. Anyway, be proud. Today, you furthered the bounds of science.
And there you have it. Sark's cutscene is at least a little bit longer than the other ones. And we have defeated this threat to the Ascalonian Catacombs. That's all 3 paths. What we could do now is continue replaying it for the very small amount of tears we get from the mini encounters. But in general, you would want to wait 24 hours now, then come back, and you get to do Ascalon Catacombs again. Your other option, if you still want lots and lots of tears, is to do the other dungeons. And once you've done 8 unique paths, as I mentioned before, you would obviously then be able to choose some more tiers after that. So, yeah, that's the dungeon. Those are the 3 paths. That's the story after Air and Ritlock Brimstone leave and what players were expected to do over and over. I think it is interesting to see, especially how Ascalon Catacombs aligned with their original ideas. And you can definitely see in that interview I gave you in part 0, at what point Colin Johansson stopped talking about what was really implemented and instead started talking about what he liked the idea of and was in line with the philosophies, but wasn't actually done. Here I do want to show you guys the vendor right at the end, where we can scroll through their wares. So there are 2 different vendor lists. One's for weapons, first of all. You get ghost slaying sigils, which help you kill ghosts In theory, nice for farming explorable, right? Except that you're mostly killing gravelings instead of ghosts. You get the Ascalonian weapon skin set. I showed that off in the main series. That's the one with the day and night cycle. Truly awesome, and was something the devs talked about a lot pre-release, and ended up being one of the only sets with it. Then 2 other objects at the top of the list: Offering of Ascalon and Gift of Ascalon. The gift, particularly, you'll see is written in purple, and that's what you're going to use for some of your legendary weapon crafting. The prices are generally all really reasonable these days, though for a period of about a week or 2 at launch, things were very expensive and you didn't get much currency. So anyone who got those weapons right at the start, or got the armors right at the start, really looked very rare and very flash. Over on the armor selection, we have Runes of the Monk. These are really good healing runes. I put those on Deborah, one of my healing guardian characters. You get the opportunity to buy tonics that I showed off in the dungeon. And lastly, a recipe for a food or utility that also helps you kill ghosts better. The one for Ascalon, actually, I think is implemented a bit different to all the others. Its recipe list has charged lodestones or something, which is very expensive. And in general, that's your loot. I'll note lastly that there are a couple of really rare back pieces and trinkets you can get based purely on luck from the drops themselves in the dungeon and the mini chests. They're not available as vendor wares, and I've always wondered why the devs didn't allow them to be directly purchased, considering the whole point of the currency system is to allow people who are unlucky to eventually get what they want via the tokens instead of pure dumb luck. But there you have it. That's it, guys. Ascalon Catacombs, and a lot of discussion about dungeons in general. Join me next time for Cordicus's Manor, which I anticipate will be a lot shorter since we've laid a lot of the groundwork in the commentary here today. Hope you enjoyed, everyone. Hope you learned something. Let me know what you think. I'll see you next time.